Welcome on Texas Football. I'm Bobby Burton, your host, joined by CJ Vogel, a Longhorn Weekly. Today, CJ, Steve Sarkisian talking to the media a little bit later. We'll have all of that for you guys, as well as some other news and notes. But there's breaking news out of Austin. The Austin American-Statesman reporting that Nick Brooks, the very talented offensive lineman at the University of Texas, young freshman, was arrested on Sunday night for driving while intoxicated, Sunday morning. So that would be Saturday night, driving while intoxicated. We have yet to hear from Steve Sarkisian or anybody from the university on these details. As we hear more, we will definitely put it out there. CJ, I've got to say this is a little bit disappointing because one of the things that we were going to talk about today in this video were what we called spring risers. Who were some of the guys that we thought had really good springs that were on the uptick on the 40 acres? Nick Brooks was certainly one of those.
Absolutely. And it's everybody that we've talked to behind the scenes, folks that attended practice, just seeing how the 6'7" offensive lineman that's right around 350 pounds out of Georgia was moving within his first 15 practices at Texas. There's a lot of praise there, and that name continued to pop up. Of course, he was working with that second unit at the left tackle position, backing up Trevor Gooseby. It felt like everything was moving in the direction towards a very promising start to his Texas career. This obviously a setback, very upsetting, of course, but ultimately on the field, it was a strong season for Nick Brooks. Hopefully this is a wake-up call and something that he can continue to build upon for his college career.
Sark, again, has not said anything yet publicly. We're waiting for him to see what happens here. He may have more comments, but we're taping this before he has any comments. I hope you guys understand that. CJ, other spring risers, in your opinion, give us a couple of names that you think you're going to be talking about this week and in the rest of this summer, really, spring into the summer, as we wait for Texas to take the field again.
Yeah, we'll start on the defensive side of the ball. There's actually two there I wanted to mention. The first is Warren Roberson. Going into year 3, you kind of wondered where he would be in the pecking order on the cornerback room. But, as Texas looks more and more towards implementing some man-to-man coverage this year, Roberson's name has popped up pretty often. He's a quick, twitchy guy out of Red Oak, and now it feels like he's starting to play some ball like a guy entering his third year, which is kind of the hope, right? You get to this level, you want to find a way into the rotation. Strong spring overall for Warren Roberson. And, of course, Grayson Littleton. He's been a name that's popped up as well, Bobby. I know you've heard some positives. Jared Hamilton has heard some positives as well about Grayson Littleton. I'm not sure this was the expectation coming in with Cade Phillips and Caleb Chester also in that room, but right now, Grayson Littleton making some headway among some of the freshmen. And, of course, Lance Jackson. I've heard him anywhere from being a first-round pick in a few years to just being a guy that's going to see the field immediately this year as well. So all in all, Bobby, we hear about this freshman class and how talented it is with 22 early enrollees getting on the field early. After 15 practices, we can make several videos over what we've heard and how impactful these guys might be early in their career. But right now, really solid start for a number of these guys. And I'll also add in Dalen McCutcheon on the offensive side, making the most of his opportunities with no DeAndre Moore, a limited Ryan Wingo, to run first unit and to be very advanced in his knowledge of the playbook this early has been a recurring theme in terms of what I've heard for Dalen McCutcheon, a positive in that regard as well.
So on offense, the freshman Dalen McCutcheon, Nick Brooks, in your opinion, what about Emory Winston? You heard much there with so many, with a real opportunity at tight end, not only with the graduation of Juan Davis and Gunnar Helm, but also the injury to Jordan Washington.
Yeah, I mean, look, at 240 pounds, the way that he moves, you wouldn't expect him to be that fluid, that smooth in his routes. And it looks like he's catching passes with mittens, very soft hands. It's something that, again, running with that first unit. I know Texas has still deployed 12 personnel with the 2 tight ends, with Spencer Shannon out there alongside Amari Winston with that first unit this spring. But to see him as that more pass-catching receiving tight end has been a welcoming sight. Of course, 240 pounds, about 6'1.5", 6'2". He's not a big body, but he plays bigger than his listed size. And, of course, that threat down the field is something that Texas has continued to build upon with Jatavian Sanders now into Gunnar Helm. Will it be Winston this fall? We'll wait and see, but a very solid start for him this spring.
All right, let's talk. Those are the true freshmen, but let's also talk about the returners, guys that are coming back that have also made that like spring rising. You mentioned Warren Roberson as one of those guys. And I want to put Parker Livingstone out there. He is a guy that has been a pleasant surprise, I think, this spring, almost from the very outset, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you knew coming into the spring someone was going to have to take that leap. You had a limit to DeAndre Moore. Of course, Ryan Wingo was healthy to begin the spring, but didn't last too long before that hammy started to linger. Then you started to look around that wide receiving room saying, okay, who's been here? Who knows the playbook? Who can step up? And that name that we heard basically making big play after big play vertically down the field was Parker Livingstone. And I think that there's a connection there, having now lived with Arch Manning, having worked with him in that second unit a year ago. There's that little connection that they can build upon. They certainly did this year, Bobby. I'll also throw out Daniel Cruz on the interior going into year 2. That's a name that we continue to hear has been really maybe as bright of an offensive line future as anybody in that room for Kyle Flood right now, working with that second unit right behind Cole Hudson at the center position. There's a lot of promise with those two, and I think at some point you're going to see them continue to grow their role come the fall.
I see that and hear that also. The question I have, the running back room, and this is what I've been told kind of, is that number one back is unquestionably Trey Wisner with Cedric Baxter out. Both Jarrett Gibson and Christian Clark were said to have pretty good springs. Gibson held off Clark for the most part. And part of what I'm being told is that he has kind of reshaped his body a little bit this offseason, maybe leaned it out a little bit, and that has helped him get a little quicker in the hole. We'll see if that carries forward. What about on the defensive side of the ball? I keep hearing, for example, not that it's pleasant surprises, I guess, but he's a transfer, and that's Brad Spence. He is a name that has come on in the second half of spring, where people are thinking that he may, I don't know if he's going to start, but he's an absolute piece of this defense where the Longhorn, I think the Longhorn coaches would all say, this guy's going to play for us in 2025.
Absolutely. And it's interesting seeing Brad Spence. I remember in bowl season for some of those bowl practices, just watching him walk around the field saying, whoa, that guy's got a physique and a build that I wasn't expecting, right? He's very built up top. And of course, was lingered a little bit in that first half of the spring, kind of nicked up. But once he got back to 100% and they kind of took the reins off of him and said, all right, go play some football. Bobby, that was a name that popped up basically every practice from, number 9 to number 15 to end out the final 2 weeks of spring practice. That was Brad Spence. Absolutely. We heard from Sarkisian in terms of how versatile that front seven can be. Look, you can just throw a Trey Moore off the edge, line him up at linebacker, do the same with Brad Spence, throw both on the field with an Anthony Hill and Colin Simmons. And how do you defend that? How do you know who's coming? What are the identification issues that it's going to cause opposing offensive lines? We've talked about that and kind of had some theories with Rod Babers in terms of what your NASCAR package could look like. Right now, Brad Spence absolutely going to be a name that you see on the field. His 4.5 sacks from a year ago, I would imagine is going to be something that Texas looks to deploy very early against Ohio State.
They're looking to move from NASCAR to F1. By the way, CJ, hey, I would say this: the other two names that have come up quite a bit as kind of risers or guys that you weren't necessarily thinking of off the top of your head. Alex January, we were told, had a dominating scrimmage at points on Saturday to close out spring camp. And then also Jelani McDonald, apparently the safety from Waco, taking another step this spring as well.
Yeah, we saw glimpses of it last year, right? I look at, his time against Vanderbilt, that first start for an injured Andrew Makuba. And within the first quarter, there were 3 hits where I think in the press box, I was sitting there saying, whoa, where does this coming from? But that's Jelani. And he was asked himself, he said, are you the hardest hitter? He said, look, we're all the hardest hitters. But, to step in that role alongside Michael Taft in the back end of that Texas secondary, his versatility will also allow him to spin down into the box when a Derek Williams plays and is back healthy. But overall, this has been that leap that you hope to see for a guy returning that saw glimpses of the field a year ago, now expected to take a starting role. He's checked every box so far. And of course, that continuity with Michael Taft, that chemistry, I think is something that's going to certainly benefit the Longhorns come, week 1 in the fall.
January having a good spring as well. That, of course, that's important because of just the lack of depth that's been going on up front now with the addition of Murad Watson as well as Levon Johnson. Texas will get some numbers at defensive tackle in the summertime, but it's nice to hear positive things about Alex January as well. All right, CJ, let's move forward, but talk about some other things going on with recruiting that happened over the weekend, as well as the Texas baseball team. But before we do that, I want to say thank you to our friend that is Perry Ricard over at Bluebird Organizing. If you've got a cluttered playroom, chaotic kitchen, desk overflowing, we've all been there, and we all don't know how to get started even, much less how to maintain it once we finish. But with Bluebird Organizing, getting organized doesn't have to be overwhelming. They'll create organized plans designed specifically for you and your family. You'll even be able to impress and support your household when you can easily empty the dishwasher because you know where everything goes now. If the thought of having someone come look at your personal space feels overwhelming, Bluebird Organizing understands it's no small task or no small ask to let a stranger come into your home. But with Bluebird and Perry Ricard, there's no judgment, only efficient plans that make your desk paperwork disappear, playrooms cease to exist as a tripping hazard, etc. Call or text Perry today, 737-346-7779. That's 737-346-7779 to book your free in-person consultation today. She can also help seniors move to senior living, a number of different things she can help you out with from an organizational perspective. Again, that's Perry Ricard over at Bluebird Organizing. Hey, CJ, the next piece I wanted to talk about recruiting. You were on hand with a bunch of recruits coming through the defensive line group, the cornerback group. There were just a lot of guys. Number one running back in the country, Derek Cooper on campus. Give us a couple of just overriding thoughts based on what you saw on campus on Saturday with all those guys coming through.
Yeah, we'll start with the defensive line. Guys like Emmanuel Ruffin, guys like, you start looking through some of these guys that Texas brought in. I'll start with Emmanuel Ruffin because that was one of the more physically impressive guys that we saw walk in, Bobby. I couldn't believe actually how fit he was, ready to go. Vodney Cleveland, another, and Kendall Gerville, who I think Texas made a really strong move for in terms of getting in a position to be contender come official visits. Of course, Emmanuel Ruffin actually said no official visit is set yet. You start looking at what he has set up in terms of his month of June: LSU May 30th, Florida June 6th, Tennessee June 13th, Alabama to wrap things up June 20th. I absolutely believe Texas will find a way into that official visit month come the month of June there in the back end. But other than that, you start looking at the back end as well. Talking to Devon Benjamin and some of the guys that we've seen over the years start to have really positive and impactful Texas careers. Jamie French being one of them, where that charisma, that smile, that ability to speak and talk, that just kind of attracts you to follow. He's absolutely one. You turn on the tape and say, whoa, this is a top 30 player in the country. Yeah, I like this. So Devon Benjamin absolutely was a shock for me. He was a guy that I immediately felt attracted to when speaking with him. Texas also brought in Jermaine Bishop back to campus, who I thought with his family just helped cement where Texas is in his standing right now. Of course, we believe that he is a guy that Texas leads for pretty noticeably at the moment, of course. And Cameron Jaimila coming out of Goodyear, Arizona, Desert Edge High School, very physically impressive. And that's been the theme for these cornerbacks coming in. Of course, you talk about Hayward Howard, you talk about Samari Matthews, Justice Fitzpatrick, another. Texas going after cornerbacks right now with great size, great length. And after speaking with them a little bit, the mentality to sit there and say, yeah, I see what Texas does with their man coverage. You know where you are in the zone, the communication, the style of play. That's something that they are attracted to currently in the SEC. So all in all, I thought it was a very positive day. And look, anytime you have the number one running back, Derek Cooper, on campus, Bobby, that's a pretty good weekend for Chad Scott and the Texas offense. Ultimately, getting that official visit is something that Texas is expecting right now. He, of course, did not, or I guess, announced that he would not go through with his Penn State official this weekend while on campus. Ultimately, we believe that will end up going to the Longhorns.
Yeah, I just wrote down some names. Derek Cooper, number one running back in the country. Kendrick Gerville, number one defensive tackle in the country, potentially was on campus. You mentioned Vodney Cleveland, Emmanuel Ruffin, both out of Birmingham area, DBs, Jermaine Bishop out of Willis, Cameron Hamil out of Arizona, Justice Fitzpatrick out of New Jersey via now South Florida, I believe, and then Devon Benjamin out of Oaks Christian. Those are just some of the guys. That's 10 guys, I think, that are top 100 players in the country, potentially, that were on campus over the weekend. So it gives you a glimpse, or at least a taste, of what Texas brought in and where they're going. Some of those guys have already said, yes, I'm setting up official visits. This is part of Sark's process. A lot of these guys had not set up official visits to Texas, but Texas just wanted to get them on campus for an unofficial visit and then let them gauge whether or not they wanted to come back to Texas for an official visit in June. That's what's going on right now. Some of these guys are going to have to either change their official visits and add Texas or not come back. And that's just the bottom line. But Sark wants this to be not just a one and done type visit scenario. So a lot of these guys, we'll see exactly whether or not they set up official visits to Texas. Some of them, of course, already have. Make sure you check out ontexasfootball.com for the latest in football recruiting news. By the way, CJ and Jerry Hamilton covering that really well, as well as Jeff Howe now for us. CJ, moving on from that and kind of tying it back in, Texas has 23 draft picks over the last 2 years, 12 this year, 11 last year. Any final thoughts on the NFL draft for you that you want to point out?
Well, you got one at least at every single position on the board. And I think that's really encouraging when you can say over the last 2 years, you've produced, 4 wide receivers, 4 offensive linemen, 4 defensive linemen, now 3 running backs, a quarterback. You go down the list, there's a guy at every position that you can point to and say they were developed, they improved year after year. They found a way to the NFL from the University of Texas. It's been a while since you
at every position. At every
position, of course. Yeah. And it kind of got a little sweaty at the quarterback spot, of course, going into late Saturday afternoon. But point being, there is not a position right now on the Texas roster that you could point to and say they aren't playing at an NFL caliber level. And again, it's been a while since you could say that. And I think that ultimately will carry on with this staff, even with some coaching changes. We've heard positives throughout the spring at a number of these new spots. But going into year 5 now, year 2 in the SEC, I think Texas is in a very healthy spot in terms of talent and development. When Texas is winning, Bobby, I don't know how you negatively recruit the University of Texas.
Yeah, that's a great point. And at every single spot. That's really, really impressive. CJ, a Longhorn baseball team swept A&M. A lot of chatter about that. 20,000 plus were at the games over the 3-game set against the Aggies. What does this do to Texas? They're now, I think it's an all-time record, 19-2 out of the gate in the SEC. I wrote this on Sunday night, and I completely still believe it. On a campus full of champions right now at the University of Texas, literally, there are champions everywhere you look in various sports. I mean, women's beach volleyball won their first conference championship in their first year this weekend, by the way. Congratulations to them. But in a campus full of champions, you can't tell me that this baseball team isn't the most surprising one of all of them. Because, I mean, look, Jim Schlossnagle's been here 1 year. David Pierce just got fired, for lack of production a year ago. And to turn around in 9 months, essentially, what's going on with the baseball team? Is it pitching that's kind of been the secret ingredient that they've really hit on? Timely hitting, maybe from a freshman and Rodriguez. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, you got to start with the pitching, and this was an A&M team coming into the season number 1 overall in the country. It took them a long time, right, to get to where they felt like they were playing at that level. And coming into this Texas series, look, they had averaged 11.5 runs over their last 11 games. They were playing their best baseball of the season. Of course, you didn't have a Jared Spencer, your Friday night guy, to lead off the series against A&M. It didn't matter, right? You get a 2-1 victory Friday night. You get another 1-run victory throughout the next 2 games. It's just – this team just figures out ways to win. And I know that Texas has had talented teams in the past, but I don't think that they've had that resiliency, right? I look back again to Tuesday game in San Marcos. Texas was down multiple runs 3 different times, yet found ways to scratch and claw back, and ultimately timely hitting, as you mentioned, Bobby, a grand slam in the top of the ninth, ended up winning that game. So it was very much the same case on Sunday whenever Texas had to battle back twice against Texas A&M to tie the game. And of course, you mentioned Adrian Rodriguez, a solo opposite field home run down the left field line. They just find ways to win, and the pitching has been spectacular. And I think Texas on Sunday specifically went to some guys that you haven't seen in high-pressure situations, yet the outcome remained the same. They dominated the zone. They put balls in play right to their fielders, and of course, those guys made plays. But right now, 19-2, I'm with you. I don't know if there was an ounce of me coming into the year that we'd be sitting here saying, number 1 overall team, 19-2. This is where we're sitting, Texas, the number 1 team in the country. That it's been a remarkable coaching job by Max Wiener and Jim Schlossnagle.
All right, I want to end with this, a little bit of a downer, unfortunately. We mentioned Nick Brooks in the DWI at the top of the show. Just got word that and it could be a career-ending situation. Ryan Watts, former Longhorn defensive back, has been released by the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it sounds like it's medical. And it sounds like he could be going through a medical retirement from football. Young man out of Little Elm. Wish him nothing but the best. But the Steelers and Ryan Watts come to terms with him leaving football on a medical retirement. Looks like issue. Of course, he had that stinger issue, the narrowing of the canal that happened really late in that final year at Texas. And then in the preseason last year with the Steelers, when it looked like he was going to make the roster, even CJ got injured in that way. And it looks like now the Steelers letting him go. So our best wishes to Ryan Watts. Hopefully you guys out there also send him well wishes via Twitter or however, whatever social media outlet you use. But I wanted to put that in there at the very end. All right, that's going to do it. We'll have more for you guys here on Texas football a little bit later in the day. We've got Steve Sarkisian at the Houston Touchdown Club. We'll have that video up as well. And make sure you check in on any news and notes in recruiting and or team news, like the Nick Brooks situation. We'll be monitoring that at ontexasfootball.com. That's ontexasfootball.com. All right, CJ, thank you so much for this episode. Also, thank you to Perry Ricard over at Bluebird Organizing. For CJ Vogel, I'm Bobby Burton. That's been Longhorn Weekly. Hook 'em.